Benedict, what do you think of the polling and how the Conservatives are now looking?
Oh, I think you should be terribly concerned if you are a Conservative. These are pretty staggering numbers, but it's not just that. I think it's actually, Labour have been in the lead for some time, but there's now a sort of an added confidence, an added swagger to the Labour Party. And as you just touched on, it's not because they've been offering anything sort of radically different. They've just sort of held their nerve while all throughout the Boris Johnson period, where he sort of occupied the centre. They've waited for Liz Truss to vacate the centre, and now they're very happily filling it. They have touched upon a few things that are increasingly popular. That includes that things like nationalisation is increasingly popular. Whatever you might think of the economics of it, it is something, especially in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, people are looking at things like energy and saying, well, why is it that we're leaving things like energy that we have in abundance beneath our feet to the whims of the market? They look at how things like Gazprom or Aramco are able to prop up other governments, and they ask themselves, well, why can't we have a piece of that? They look at Norway's sovereign wealth fund and they think, why can't we have a piece of that if we are potentially so energy wealthy? So they think of that as being something that is not necessarily a bad thing. Now, obviously, it would be tremendously expensive to try to base it all around renewables, and it would take an incredibly long time to get off the ground. But things do need to be, got going at some point. So I don't see that people would necessarily oppose that. I mean, more broadly, when you look at Liz Truss's predicament, we're talking about a lot of market hysteria, and this is potentially all salvageable as long as she can sort out supply side, she can get growth going. The problem is there's more unpopularity down the road, especially amongst her own MPs. One of the things that is often spoken about in this country is the lack of house building. That would massively help growth. How do you get that past Tory MPs who don't want anything built in their constituencies where people will revolt around that? That's going to be very difficult to get those MPs on side. The other thing, of course, to do with that is these economic zones, or free ports, as they were called in a previous iteration under Rishi Sunak. Again, you need local authorities to agree to that. You need local councils. You need planning permission. And again, the planning regulations in this country are very difficult. How are you going to get people on board with that sort of thing? It's probably not going to work. And the last thing, the real kicker that Liz Truss's plan relies on is immigration. Well, I don't know how the average Tory voter feels about immigration this summer after how everything has gone with the small boats and the steadfast refusal of the government to do anything about that. But that is going to go down like a cup of cold sick in many parts of, especially the Red Wall. So, all I say is it's as simple as getting growth going again. Bon chance avec ça, and you've got 18 months in which to do it.
Yes, it may ironically be easier for the government to get through tax cuts than supply-side reforms because of the NIMBYism you just explained. And, of course, more immigration is not what the average Conservative voter wants, probably not the average Labour voter either. Now, one front page that I saw that caught my eye, which is brutal, was the Metro. A rich, best-served cold. Let Liz own the moment. Now, this, of course, is Rishi Sunak, who's saying he's not going to turn up to the Conservative Party conference. Do you reckon a lot of people, a lot of Tory MPs, aren't even going to bother?
I suspect you'll see a couple deciding not to want the spotlight focused on them. This does sort of strike me a little bit as like when David Miliband left the Labour Party after his brother Ed usurped him, in his opinion, and decided, all right, well, this isn't my mess, so I'm going to go off and do something else. I think this is a little bit of, on the one hand, pettiness, but it is also sort of sending a signal to say, look, here's what you could have won. We did warn you that this was going to happen, and now it's happening. But the problem is, I think, for Rishi Sunak, it doesn't necessarily suggest that he's in a conciliatory mood. It doesn't suggest that he's offering anything that could perhaps support the government. And this is, realistically, I mean, as you touched on with Liam Halligan, it would actually potentially be a worse option to row back on all of these things because the markets would smell blood, Tory MPs would smell blood, Labour would certainly smell blood, and then it would just become a bit of a free-for-all. As Churchill said, when you find yourself going through hell, the best thing is to keep going. If the Tory party are going to lose the next election, then they've already lost it. That's the long and short of it. So the reality is, as I've touched upon, a lot of these issues are long-term, they're structural, and they are to be found actually within the Tory party, within the NIMBYism of the Tory party. This needs to be addressed at some stage anyway. Now that we find ourselves in this, as I say, Liz Truss has just got to she's got to bite the bullet as unpopular as this is and keep going. And